Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to your Lunch Break Live. My name is Ivana Harinque if you're new here, and if you're not, thank you for coming back. Today is Wednesday, August the 24th, and while it might seem far away, we are inching closer to Election Day every day and every week. Today, I am joined by our reporter, John Sharp, as John is here today to talk a little bit about the Libertarian Party and also how the Libertarians are making their first kind of back to the ballot in 20 years here. This is the first time there's been a statewide presence of the Libertarian Party since 2002. That's 20 years. John, I know you did some reporting on the party and on their return to the ballot earlier this week. So tell us a little bit about the Libertarian Party. How are they back on the ballot and what races are they running in?
Yeah, so to a surprise to a lot of folks in this state, the Libertarian Party is back on the ballot for the first time in 20 years. They were able to get back on the ballot because they achieved the number of signatures to get back on the ballot. They had to have 3% of the signatures from the last governor's race. So the number of voters, you take from the 2018 governor's election, you take 3%, and they were able to achieve the number of signatures in order to gain ballot access this year. And that was somewhere around 51,000 that they had to get. And they got 80,000 signatures. So they went above and beyond the call of duty there to get back on the ballot. Through my reporting, it came out that, they did get some support from the National Libertarian Party in order to achieve this. They had somewhere around $250,000 was spent in order to hire petitioners that can go around and get the required signatures in order for the party to be back on the ballot. So the deadline in order to get those signatures was May 24th. That's a significant date because that was when the primary was in this state. So they achieved that on the primary date. So it kind of fell under the radar because a lot of the statewide political coverage at that point in time was on the results of the primary. And but the Libertarian Party is back on the ballot. The Secretary of State has certified that fact, and away we go. They got about, I want to say, somewhere around 60 or so candidates that are running for office. All the statewide races, they'll have a candidate running. And voters in November will have the choice of in Alabama, they have the choice of straight party ticket voting. So voters can just mark it right off the bat, their ballots, either on Republican, Democrat, or Libertarian. And that is a first in quite some time here in this state. So yes, we have I guess you could say, a legitimate third party on the ballot this year. And
having a Libertarian candidate for every statewide race, and again, being able to have the option to straight ticket Libertarian in Alabama, if that's what you choose to do in November, that is a big deal. So, John, 20 years is a long time. A lot of things change in 20 years. How did we go from having the Libertarians on the ballot in Alabama in 2002 to not having them, and then now back in 2022? How did they get relevant again? Or I'm sure that some people would argue they always were, but how did, in the eyes of the state, in the eyes of the Secretary of State, and in terms of the voters, how did they gain that popularity again?
Well, simply put, they were able to put together a movement to get enough signatures on the ballot and appear on the ballot for the first time in 20 years. It was a petition drive that they coordinated a couple of years ago that they started. I believe it was in 2020 from what I was told. And they began accumulating these signatures in which they could achieve the right number to get put onto the ballot. They took a look at the governor's race in 2018, and they needed 3% of the number of voters who participated that year in that governor's election. And they were able to take that number, and then they multiplied that. So they went, the number was about 51,000 signatures that they needed in order to be on the ballot this year. And they were able to get about 80,000 signatures, which was the smart play because, if you barely get enough signatures, some of those signatures, you go through them, they might be disqualified for various reasons. But the Libertarian Party was able to go well above and beyond the call of duty there. Like I said earlier, they received financial support from the national party. So about $250,000 went into this effort. That's costly, just to appear on the ballot here in Alabama. Talking to some experts that kind of look at this stuff, ballot access experts, they say that the state of Alabama has very difficult, restrictive ballot access rules. One of the key things that the Libertarian Party is trying to do in this particular election is get 20% of the vote in one of these statewide races in which they have a candidate running. They're looking at some of these races in which there's no Democrat running. For instance, lieutenant governor's race. You have incumbent Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth running, but there's no Democratic opponent. The Libertarian Party is fielding a candidate hoping to get at least 20% of the vote, in which that would make them, if they get that 20%, that would make them eligible to be on the 2024 ballot. That is a big goal for the Libertarian Party, is that so they don't have to go through this petition process again, which is expensive. In order to get back on the ballot in 2024 as a statewide party, they have to achieve 20%. They have to get 20% of the vote in one of these statewide races. And the way they see that being possible is if they can do that in one of these races in which the Democrats are not fielding a candidate.
That's interesting because it kind of looks like a numbers game, right? You look at what election is coming up. You look at all of these statewide races that are up for grabs in November, and some of those statewide races that the Democratic Party has not put a candidate in would be more likely for a third party candidate, like a Libertarian candidate, to garner 20% of that vote. It's an interesting numbers game, John. And I think it kind of goes to some people get so fed up with politics because of things like this, because there's a lot of red tape. It's a lot of strategy, and it's a lot of a game, almost like a game of battleship, right? And then on the other hand, that's why some people love it. So that's an interesting point to make, and something that I bet a lot of people probably don't realize. Now, in the last 20 years, why haven't they tried this before? Did they not have the money to go on this massive petition assignment? Did they not have the candidates to put up? Or what exactly happened in that 20-year period?
Well, there have been independent candidates that have run before, and third-party candidates that have run before in Alabama in the last 20 years. It just hasn't been a statewide effort. Again, it's expensive, number one. Number two, this is the ballot access rules in this state are considered restrictive. I reached out and talked to an expert in this, Richard Winger with Ballot Access News. He tracks this stuff. He's tracked the history of this in the state of Alabama as well as elsewhere in the United States. One thing that he provided to me is that, this 20% number that the Libertarians have to achieve in one of these statewide races is the highest parameter of any state in the country. So, for instance, he told me the median average of ballot in order to retain the party's access on the ballot in a future election is about 2% of the vote. So in Alabama, it's got to be 20%. So that's pretty significant, and it probably would deter a third party that doesn't have the financial means, does not have a field of candidates to make a big push statewide in order to reappear on the ballot. So that's the Libertarian Party, though, has been around. We've been familiar with them for quite some time. They've been around since the 1970s. It's pretty much a party that runs on a philosophy of independent liberty, less government intervention in all facets of life. And that's kind of the stance that they're running here in Alabama. Some of their issues might be run opposite of the Republican Party in this state. Some of their issues are going to run opposite of the Democratic Party in this state. And that's why they're a third party. And that's why they're trying to make a push here this year on the ballot to either get that 20% on the statewide race so they can continue on in 2024. And then some of the candidates, they want to win their races. They're going to make a push. I think on some of the statewide races, they do have definitely an uphill climb, but they're looking at maybe some of these state house and state senate races, maybe even a sheriff's contest where they could potentially be very competitive.
John, why does Alabama have such restrictive laws when it comes to getting on the ballot? Again, we talk about being expensive. We talk about, I think you said the national average was 2% of the vote for that party to get on the next ballot. In Alabama, it's 20%. Why this big discrepancy with Alabama's ballot access laws?
So you have to go back to the 1990s during Governor Fob James's tenure in office. There was a Greene County Commission race in which the big long story, but the Democratic primary resulted in the loser running as a member of the Patriot Party, and he got his name on the ballot and wound up winning, and that frustrated state lawmakers, and that's how they made some changes that made it more restrictive to be on the ballot. At the time, that was apparently a big issue. That was back in the mid 1990s. That was the last time ballot access legislation had passed into law in this state. There's been efforts to reform things in recent years, primarily by former Senator Cam Ward, Republican State Senator Cam Ward. He pitched some legislation that would make it a little bit easier to get the sign. His bill would have taken the petition requirement from 3% of those registered voters signing a petition based on the previous governor's election in order to appear on the ballot. And he would have taken that 3% down to 1.5%. But his legislation didn't go anywhere. I don't want to say didn't go anywhere. It did get out of the state Senate, but it did not get a hearing before the state House of Representatives. So it just did not advance. So that's in this state, getting legislation like that through is a big deal. It's not as easy as in other states. Alabama has always been referred to as kind of politically as inelastic, meaning most voters are, they either align either with the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. There isn't much wiggle room in between. And so the Libertarian Party has to deal with that as well.
Is this a chance this year, these races, this statewide contest, is this a chance for Libertarians to really make a dent into that kind of process you call, and that a lot of pollsters call inelastic? Is there any type of polling to show us that some of these Libertarians could break through?
No, there's never been really much polling on the, polling in this state is never, there was a little bit of polling before in the primaries because, there's more interest in the Republican Party primary because there's that viewpoint. If you win the Republican Party primary in this state, that's pretty much indicative of who's going to win the general election. So there's not been much polling at all. Certainly none on the Libertarian effectiveness in this race. I'd be interested in seeing it, but there just isn't any right now. But some interesting national polling has come out showing general voter disgust and frustrations with the two-party political system that we have in this country. Does that reflect into Alabama? I'm a little bit skeptical that might be the case, but we'll see. I don't know, but perhaps we don't sit on an island here in Alabama. Certainly, those frustrations are felt here in this state as well. But we'll see if that makes any dent in the general election results. But as far as polling goes, as far as how the Libertarian Party is stacking up right now, I have not seen any. Perhaps we might see some closer to the election, but I have not seen any.
Now, again, these races are coming up a little bit quickly. Time seems to be flying by this year, I guess, as it does every year. But Election Day is coming up. So can you give us just a little bit of an overview about some of these candidates, about their platforms, their key issues? What are they really campaigning on to get voters' attention this fall?
Well, the main thing is they want to get voter retention. And I talked to the candidate running for governor. And, he knows he's got an uphill battle running in that particular race. I mean, Governor Kay Ivey is well-financed. She has name recognition. People know who she is. She won a primary without even having a runoff against 8 different candidates. It's certainly an uphill battle, that's for sure. But in talking to the candidate who's running for governor, he'd indicated to me that, that the idea is to get the Libertarian Party message out the best that they can. They got limited resources to do that as far as advertising goes during this election cycle. But their key is that they want to get 20% in one of these statewide races in which a Democrat's not running in. It's not just lieutenant governor. There's several other races as well, treasurer, auditor, some of these down ballot statewide races. That's their key strategy. Of course, they'd like to win a race. I mean, who wouldn't? But the reality is that it's definitely an uphill battle for them. They like to get their message out on how they view certain political issues. They believe that the government should be hands off on the issue of abortion. And that's a big, that runs opposite of where the Republican Party stands on that issue in this state. They are also kind of a pro legalization of marijuana party. That's an issue that might resonate with a younger voter. But on the other side, that would not, a particular issue that might not resonate with the Democratic Party is that they believe the government should be totally hands off on gun control. So that's some of the issues. They want to get their message out on where they stand. They kind of want they're definitely an individual liberty, government hands off on almost anything type of party. That's kind of where they stand.
Now, again, election day is coming up in November. Seems like this is an uphill battle for a lot of these libertarians on the ballot. John, are they willing to debate? Do we know if they are trying to get any debates for especially some of these big offices like the governor's race?
Yeah, I think they are. I know that there was some interest in having a debate in the Secretary of State's race, and the Libertarian candidate had expressed interest to the League of Women Voters of being interested there. Yeah, I think that they certainly want that opportunity to have their voices heard. I mean, a debate would be free publicity for them, and they certainly need that when you're talking about campaign finance issues. So, yeah, they're willing to speak and speak up and speak often. But time will tell how effective that'll be for them as we get closer to the election.
Really interesting reporting here, John. We're going to leave a link so that people can read it, get really in depth about just this issue and about how libertarians are back on the ballot again for the first time since 2002. It's a long time there. John, thanks for digging into this, and thank you for explaining it to us, especially some of us who maybe have not kept up with the Libertarian Party, or especially what has been happening in the time since they've been off the ballot. So, John, thank you. Everybody watching, thank you. We'll see you tomorrow.